Bonsoir, good evening, welcome at the beginning of this Advent period, virtually to the Chapel for Europe, this multicultural and ecumenical space in the midst of the European institutions. However, tonight we are not limited by the physical borders of the European quarter. And we are together with Nikolaas Sintobin, Jesuit, writer, internet chaplain, and a specialist on Ignatius spirituality. Goedenavond, Nikolaas.
Goedenavond.
And this is the third and the last of the series of workshops, Surprised by Joy, trying to discover God in our daily lives. Nikolaas, at the first workshop, we focused on discernment. At the second, on joy. And tonight, on this intriguing Jesuit principle, agere, contra. Nikolaas, why are we invited by St. Ignatius sometimes to do just the opposite of what we would do spontaneously? Nikolaas, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christian. Well, good evening. I'm glad to be with you tonight for the third time. As Christian said, in the first meeting, we spoke about the origins of the discovery by Ignatius of the art of discernment, let's say, and in the second meeting, I spoke about the place of joy and the particular importance of joy as a pointer towards the presence of God, and what Pope Francis teaches us with regard to that. And tonight I would like to share some thoughts indeed with you about a quite particular aspect of that Ignatian spirituality and discernment, which is the agere contra, and I could translate it into English by saying, just do the opposite, which is a bit strange. And you will see, I will I will try to explain the intuition of Ignatian with regard to this. But first, before giving you 7 hints with regard to that agere contra, I would first like to remember 3 basic rules of discernment. We have already been discussing in the previous weeks. So, you know, discernment is based upon the experience of God throughout our deeper interiority and the feelings we can discover there. So, therefore, it is necessary, and it remains necessary, to listen, to be connected with those feelings of ours. Because although we like to speak a lot about the importance of feelings, when things become a little bit serious and important, people tend simply to not to listen at all to their feelings and to simply refer to the intelligence, to the objectivity of the intelligence. So remaining connected with the interiority. And therefore Ignatius gives us a very precious tool, instrument, which is the examen, la prière d'alliance in French, het levensgebed in Dutch. So to listen in a praying mode to what has happened to us during the day. That's first basic rule, the importance of listening. And more in particular, Ignatius asks us to give priority to positive feelings, and not just because positive feelings are fun, but because positive feelings, and in particular ongoing positive feelings, say something about the presence of God, rather than the absence of God, which often is accompanied by negative feelings. So in that, during that discernment, when examining, for instance, an experience or just the day, at the end of the day, it's important to give priority and the main attention to those positive feelings like trust, like joy, like happiness, tranquility, rest, and so on, and not allow oneself to be the captive of anger or fear and so on, which rather indicate towards a growing distance with regard to God. The importance of listening, priority to positive feelings, and a caution with negative feelings. Ignatius does not invite to simply to delete or to how do you say, not to listen at all to those negative feelings, but he suggests be cautious with those negative feelings, because they can become so strong and they can attract all our inner attention that we become the captives of those negative feelings. So take them seriously, try to discern what is at the origin of the negative feeling during the day, during an experience, and then Ignatius suggests try to reconnect with what he calls the consolation. So those positive feelings, because they point towards God, they say something about life. That's the place where we have to be. Okay, 3 basic rules: listening, priority to positive feelings, and a very conscious and cautious way of dealing with those negative feelings. Now I would like to give 7 short suggestions. I have all put under the title of agere, contra, doing the opposite. It's quite amazing. Ignatius gives a lot of attention to the desire, to what one feels as being important to one's life, what you should do, and so on. And at the same time, he very often says, hey, but do not always do what you would spontaneously like to do, and sometimes you should rather do the opposite. It's quite amazing. So the first idea with regard to this, you could call it the Lucifer principle. You know, Lucifer is the name of the devil, and it is called, or Lucifer comes from the two Latin words, lux ferre, the one who bears the light, who brings the lux, the light. And of course, it is the light of truth. Lucifer, the devil, the evil spirit, often says the truth. When you read the gospel, you see that the demons, the bad spirits, they say the truth about Jesus. They are the first ones to recognize Jesus as the Messiah. Jesus also says the truth. So there's something similar between the devil and Jesus. But Lucifer says the truth in order to destroy people. He confronts them with their errors and so on, in order to diminish them. Meanwhile, Jesus, out of love, is moved by love, says the truth in order to help people to grow. Well, what is the agere contra in this? When we are angry, when you are mad, very angry, often we can have very right intuitions, very precise and just intuitions. But if at that moment we say those things, moved induced or moved by that anger, and with that anger, it can become like the Lucifer principle. Instead of helping the person concerned, it could rather destroy the person. If, for instance, you are a parent and one of your children has lied, and he has lied once again, and you are furious, and you say, but you are a liar. Why do you always lie? And it is right. It is right. But if you say it moved by that anger, it is very probable that the child to whom you say it will be locked in that lie, will to some extent be destroyed. If, on the contrary, you wait until the anger, and so you do the opposite what you should normally do. That means confronting immediately and saying immediately those ideas that come during anger. If you wait, you have patience, and you wait until you get tranquil, and you are able again, for instance, to love and to look with goodness to your child, then it will be possible to speak in a constructive way with that young person. And probably you will help your child to grow. The Lucifer principle. So the ideas coming during anger can be very precise, very exact, but don't tell them, don't express them immediately. Wait, shut up. Wait until rest, tranquility has come again. And then you can talk with the person. This Lucifer principle and the second idea I'm going to share with you come in particular from Pierre Favre, who was one of the founding fathers of the Society of Jesus, of whom Ignatius said he was the best specialist of discernment of the spirits. Positive feelings as opposite to ideas coming during those positive feelings. What is it about? It is good, Ignatius tells us, to trust in experiences that produce positive feelings, that give rest, that give strength, that give hope. Ignatius says you may trust in the veracity, the truth of those experiences. They probably say something that is very important for you. And it can be good also in memory to go back afterwards to those experiences and to nourish yourself again with that strength they offer you. But he says, take care with the ideas that surge during those experiences or immediately afterwards. Because spontaneously you would think, but how, such a good experience, such positive feelings, the ideas that come, they must be very good as well. Ignatius says, take care. It can be that those ideas are indeed good and trustworthy, but it can also be that they are really bad and that they are inspired. Ignatius calls him the bad spirit that takes, how does he say, takes the form of the good angel. So it's ideas that finally can be inspired by the devil, by the bad spirits. So he says, okay, those good experiences, very good, trust in them, but the ideas, you should examine them and see whether or not they come from the good spirit or the bad spirit. Remember what I told you in the first meeting about discernment. For instance, you have Corona crisis and one of your grown-up children has come back in your house because she lost her work and so on, so she stays with you. But your relationship with her is very difficult, very strained, very very difficult. And very soon, living together during the confinement, the tensions become strong again. And then you have the idea of going to walk with your daughter. And for the first time in years, you have a good sharing. And you can talk with one another without attacking one another, without harsh words and so on. That hasn't happened for many years. And you are so happy, And after that walk, you reflect on it, and there is an idea coming to you. Hey, now I know what I have to do. I have to invite my daughter each day for a long walk. Each day from now on, during confinement, we must walk for 2 hours, for 3 hours, to share, to talk with one another, because we have so much to share and so on. Can be a good idea, but it could also be a bad idea. And in this, probably it's a bad idea, because if you do too much, for years you have not been talking, you have been in a bad relationship, and if now all of a sudden you want to do it each day, that's far too much. That's far too much. It seems good. It's not good at all. So the ideas that come at the moment of a very good experience, they can come from the good spirit. They can come as well from the bad spirit. You need to examine them, and only afterwards you can know what to do with them. Third principle, the fridge principle. Maybe a strange name, the fridge principle. What's it about? You have a problem at work. You have had a traumatic experience somewhere else. You have a very difficult relationship, whatever. You have a big problem in your life. And it's taking all the energy, all the attention for a long time. And it costs you very much. It draws all the attention to itself. And here the fridge principle can offer solace. That means, Ignatius says, instead of giving always more and more attention, simply stop. You take the dossier and you put it in the fridge. And you completely try, at least, stop thinking, considering that particular issue, which is the opposite of what you would normally do. You allow yourself to take a pause and not to spend all your attention, to give all your time to that particular issue. And maybe all of a sudden, because you have put it in the fridge, you will discover that there are plenty of other things in your life, in your family, in your work, you had more or less forgotten, because all the was focused on that one damned situation that was so difficult to deal with. And if you have left it for some time, that difficult issue in the fridge, and if after some days, some weeks, you take it out of the fridge, it can happen, it can really happen that it has diminished, or it has even disappeared, or that at least it hasn't any longer the weight and the importance it had before, because you have discovered that at the same time there are many other important things in your life you had more or less forgotten, and that the enormous dimensions it had taken were maybe, well, simply fake, not true. The fridge principle, instead of giving more attention to that very hot item, just isolate it and take a rest for some time with regard to that difficult subject. A fourth hint Ignatius gives with regard to that agere contra, do the opposite. when we live in stressy times, like Corona crisis, for instance, or other things, one of the parts of life, dimensions of life, activities people tend to quit or to stop almost immediately are the purely gratuitous activities like prayer, like things that really help you to go back to the primary sources of your life. And here again, Ignatius recommends the opposite. When you are not doing well, you need not drink less at the source, you need to drink more at the source. You have more need of prayer, of silence, of meditation, of things that allow you to really come again to what is important. Maybe you should do it in another way. For instance, if really you have a lot of troubles and life is very difficult, maybe at that very moment, silent prayer will not be so easy. Maybe it's better than to pray the rosary or to read a spiritual book or such things. So adapt yourself, but not skipping the prayer. No, in the opposite. We rather need more than less. A fifth hint Ignatius gives with regards to difficult experiences. When we have thoughts we are not proud of, that are difficult, we are ashamed of, whatever, temptations, it's typical for those, let's say, difficult thoughts that they make one believe that it is better to keep quiet about them, not to speak about them, and certainly not to share it with somebody else. Talking about it would be too humiliating, embarrassing, and therefore not helpful. And here again, Ignatius recommends the opposite. Speak with a wise person, a wise counselor, and tell him openly what is happening to you. And often the mere fact of taking those, let's say, annoying thoughts out of the obscurity, out of the secret, reduces their obsessional power, and the storm can subside. And if it's not possible to talk, well, simply write about it. But talking in particular to another person, the example Ignatius gives is probably one of the best and the most spread and relevant examples. For instance, you are a married person, and you fall in love with somebody else. And you are ashamed, you don't want it, but you are madly in love with another person than your husband or your wife. And you are so ashamed, and it always becomes stronger and stronger, and you cannot imagine that you will talk about it. Well, the mere fact, and that's the example Ignatius gives in his rules for the discernment, the mere fact of talking about it, of sharing it, probably not immediately with your wife or your husband, but with the third person in whom you can trust, the mere fact of sharing it, of talking about it, often reduces enormously the tension and can help you to deal with it in a normal way. Sixth suggestion is about choosing patience when we are in a crisis. And Corona, for many people, is an experience of crisis, professionally, in the family, and so on. It is quite normal that we want, as soon as possible, get out of it as quickly as possible. And that's normal because those situations of crisis make us suffer, and we do not want that. And the advice Ignatius gives us here is, again, diametrically opposed to this. In a crisis, when you go through a personal crisis, it is better not to make new choices. And in particular, not to change choices, important choices you have made before when you were in rest, when you were in a good condition, because you are simply unable to make in a serious way a discernment and a new decision, because it's chaos in your heart, it's chaos in your head. So he says, wait, dare to choose patience, because we know that those situations of crisis, they will not last forever, and you will find again some kind of rest. So stick to the decisions you had made before. Dare to be patient. And when rest has come again, when you have again found something like a balance in your life to some extent, then you can ask yourself whether or not you should make changes, whether or not you should make other decisions, but not during the crisis itself. Choose patience. The last last suggestion, Ignatius also gives in his rules for discernment, is something that allows you to take the initiative yourself. For instance, you have a horror weekend with all those corona situation. You cannot go to your gym, your birthday party has been cancelled, your grandchildren cannot come to visit you, you would have loved to go to the concert, but you cannot go to the concert, and so on and so on. You would prefer to stay in bed all day. Please leave me alone. Typical indeed for those typical situations, for those negative feelings, is that they make us fall back on superficiality and laziness, and everything is too much. Well, the very simple hint Ignatius gives us in times of sadness is again the opposite. Do more what you would spontaneously do less. Because in that way, I will illustrate it, you can pave the way for a return to the desire of life. You do not want to do anything, you are mad, fed up with everything. Well, what I could do is go to my office and finally put that desk in order that has been in a terrible state for weeks and weeks. Well, I will bring some order to that desk. It's not difficult. That doesn't ask me a lot of concentration, but after half an hour, I will be proud of myself. And that can be the beginning of going up again. Or I have a basket full with clothes to be ironed. Well, I can finally do that ironing. It's not difficult. It's not difficult. I oblige myself to do it, even though I do not really want to do it. But at the end, when my clothes will be there nicely well done, I will be a little bit proud of myself. And maybe that can help me to reconnect with some drive, some positive energy in my life. I come to the end. Maybe you are saying now, yeah, but what you have been talking us about, Nikolaas, very sympathetic, but nothing new. That's simply common sense. And you are right. Almost the whole Ignatian spirituality is common sense. It relates to our experience. We recognize it. The contribution of Ignatius in the whole of his spirituality is not that he has invented something completely new. No, he has structured it. He has given some order and some clarity, to help one in a very simple way, because the whole Ignatian spirituality finally is very simple, to have a better insight in what is happening, and with some very simple hints, help one to structure, to order, and to clarify that personal experience. And that is what I have been trying to do with you, with these 7 hints about doing the opposite of what you would spontaneously do, as a very particular application of the discernment of the spirits of Ignatius of Loyola. That's about it.
Waiting for questions, Nikolaas, I would just comment or ask what you said at the end. It's true that the most of the rules are similar with the rule of the modern psychology. However, Ignatius formulated this in the 15th century, but for Ignatians, they are spiritual rules. So what is added value of Ignatius in comparison with the pure psychology?
Yeah, that's an important issue you raise. It's like, I would like to make a comparison. It's like coaching and spiritual guidance. Spiritual guidance, which is also very old, might seem very similar to coaching, which nowadays is very common, but there's one major difference. Coaching is simply helping, it's very important, very good, a person to find his or her way dealing with an issue, whatever. Spiritual guidance, accompaniment is very similar, but the major difference is that there is a third party. There is the person himself, herself, there is the guide, and then both of them believe in the presence of God and in the active presence of God. And the basic idea of discernment is the faith that God is inviting each one of us to life to the full, and that active, I would almost say pushing, help, love of God can be discerned through what happens in our heart, but that we are not alone. We are not alone. There is a loving one, a loving person that helps us. I see there are some questions that are coming. Can you explain again the 7th point? Well, it's when you are in a bad mood, when you are in desolation, like Ignatius calls it, spontaneously we tend to become lazy, to do only superficial things, or simply to do nothing, just to stay in your bed the whole day and leave me alone. And the agere, contra here can mean that you decide yourself to do little things, and to do them in a very conscious way. Little things that do not ask a lot of effort, a lot of concentration, like I gave the example of cleaning or making your desk, that is a really chaotic thing, putting some order into it, or going into the garden and cutting off the grass and such things. Do small good things, and it is often the case that they give you the beginning of a new dynamic, of a good feeling, and when there is a beginning, that can grow. So that's a small thing you can do, opposite to your spontaneous tendency to allow yourself to go up again. Someone says, I got the impression that this was like a therapy to get out of a depressive state. Jesus, I think I'm a Catholic, I'm not a Protestant, so I'm not very familiar with the Bible, please do apologize. But there are some quotes I know, and one is John, I hope it is John 10:10. And in John 10:10, Jesus said, I have come to give them life to the full. Christian life, the gospel, and so Christian spirituality goes about life, about living to the full, and of joy in life. That's what I spoke about last week. So I would not say it's only therapy, but certainly Christian spirituality, good Christian spirituality, has also the therapeutical value indeed. It can heal, it can allow you to overcome all kinds of problems, and depression, for instance, so very sad feelings, are one of the issues many people indeed have to deal with, and have had to deal with from always, also in the time of Ignatius. So psychology and spirituality, psychology and faith are not the opposites, are not either separate, they are mixed. They are mixed. And Ignatius is a master of developing also the psychological dimension of the human being in his spirituality. And I think that's one of the reasons why people today feel so much helped like that spirituality, because indeed it takes into account that so important psychological dimension of our life. Ignatian spirituality is not a spirituality only of piety. It's a spirituality that helps people to live, because I simply think the gospel is about that. So Stefano asked, so agere, contra, when our emotions drive us to react against offenses, violations of our belief. That was what I tried very shortly to tell with the Lucifer principle. The trap there is or the pitfall is to let oneself be guided by fury, by anger. And when we talk, when we speak with other people, being angry, being furious, whatever good ideas you can share with the person will mainly feel the anger and the fury, and the person will lock himself, and there will be no communication. And your very good suggestions, ideas, risk to be lost, to be thrown away, because the person only hears your anger and says, that guy simply wants to attack me. And he or she will simply not be able, it will be very difficult to really listen to what you have to say. And it can be that you have very, very, very good things to say, because often when you are angry, the ideas that come, that's what I wanted to say with the Lucifer principle, are very exact, are very precise. When being angry, we can be very, very lucid. Simply don't speak at those very moments. That's the whole idea. And it's in the gospel already, no, in the letters of Paul, the fraternal correction. The fraternal correction can only be given when induced, when said in a loving way. Otherwise, the effect risks to be the opposite. And it will be a double loss. The relation will be damaged, and the so good and precious ideas that have come to your mind will be lost because they will be disqualified by that anger. So shut up, try, if possible, to be patient and wait until the anger has gone down and you can again, in a loving, respectful way, start the conversation and the encounter. How long can we put a problem in the fridge? Is it not an escape or ostrich policy? That could, of course, be. Of course, that's possible. But spirituality, and in particular Ignatian spirituality, is not a simple mere technique. It's not chemistry either. It's all kinds of ideas that come into tension with one another. And the discernment, for instance, for the fridge issue, is to find the right balance. And indeed, putting things into the fridge could be a perfect excuse for, so the fridge principle, which I gave you, you could use it really as a perfect excuse for ostrich policy. But I think it has nothing to do with, or it should not have to do with ostrich policy. So you have to find the balance yourself, indeed. It's not objective, it's subjective. And to you to find the right balance in order that it helps you to grow and that it is not simply a way of escaping reality.
Concerning this question, all the seven theoretically are very beautiful. But in the given situation, which one to choose? For example, don't shut up but speak, or to put in the fridge. So it's the situation and two different possibilities to react.
Yeah. And there is no objective answer. In each particular situation, the answer will be different. And that's very annoying in Ignatian spirituality. Ignatian spirituality asks you, demands, ever again and again and again to discern. And that's why some people do not like Ignatian spirituality at all. Because Ignatian spirituality does not give you definitive, final, clear answers. It's time and again you have to discern and to find the right balance. It's not white or black. It's in 99% of the cases, it's in between. On the one hand, that allows to find really a personalized answer and outcome, but it's often not comfortable. It's often not comfortable. And therefore, it's not applicable for everybody, not because of the comforts, but some people simply do not feel at ease with this kind of spirituality. So there are excellent people, excellent Christians, who do not feel at all at ease with Ignatian spirituality. And fortunately, there are tens and hundreds of different kinds of spirituality in the Christian tradition, because there are so many different people. The similarities between Lucifer and Jesus. Well, so Lucifer literally means the bearer, so the one who bears, ferre, which is Latin verb, to bear, to bear, yeah, looks the light. So Lucifer brings the light, and he brings the light of the truth. And indeed, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, the devil says the truth. He says what is really happening. Therefore, in the Old Testament, he's also called the accuser, the one who denounces all kind of bad things that happen. And he is right, but he says those things not to help the persons that are being concerned by those things, but to try to destroy, to diminish those persons. Meanwhile, Jesus says about himself, "I'm the way, I am the truth and life." Jesus says about himself, "I'm the truth." Jesus also says the truth, but he says truth within or in a loving relationship. He says truth, the truth of a human being, in order to invite, to allow the person to grow, to stand up, and not to confront that person with his incapacity in order to diminish him. So, on the one hand, there is really an analogy, and at the same time, the way they deal with that truth is completely opposite. And so the Lucifer principle is an application of this. Can you talk a bit about, that's a good question also, about the bad spirits disguised as good? That's something Ignatius, that's an expression Ignatius uses. He says the bad spirit, the devil, the enemy of the human nature, he also calls him, can take the form of the angel of the light. That means that the bad spirit will present himself as being very good, and he will give also good feelings, which is typical for the good spirit. So he does as if he takes the mask, the form of the good spirit. But what is the difference? You can recognize him, the proverbs say, you can recognize the devil by his tail. The end is always bad. So the bad spirit, even if he takes the form of the good spirit, of the angel of light, he will begin with giving you joy and happiness. That's the logic of the temptation. The logic of the temptation. Adultery is very, very, very funny. It gives a lot of excitement and passion and whatever. But it ends bad. It ends bad. At the end, you will not feel proud. You will not feel happy. You will feel sad. So that's typical. One of the major criteria Ignatius gives to make the difference between the good spirit and the bad spirit, and is that the true consolation, the true joy coming from God remains also after the event that caused that good feeling is over. When you go back in your memory to that event, you will again feel that consolation, that strength, that hope, that happiness. So the consolation, the joy given by the good spirit is lasting. Maybe you remember the quotes I gave in the first talk, where Ignatius talks about his sick bed, and that he, thinking about becoming a real Christian, gave him joy, and that thinking about becoming again a military and a womanizer and so on also gave him joy, exactly the same joy. But that only afterwards, when reflecting on that joy, he discovered, to his amazement, to his surprise, that the joy of the idea of a Christian life was a lasting joy. Meanwhile, the joy of becoming again The womanizer, for instance, he had been before. The first was joy, but afterwards he felt sad. He felt sad. He felt empty. That's the difference between the action of the good spirits and the action of the bad spirits, even when he can take the form of the angel of light. Somebody asks, it's in French, if there is a way to escape the bad ideas another way than putting it in the fridge. It's a very vast question, of course. I would say this, what I said at the beginning. So you have the prayer of the examen, la prière d'alliance in French, levensgebed. So prayer with your experience, and the main idea of that, and I think the most important of it, is to get in touch and to discover and to rediscover time and again the consolation in your life. The small experiences of hope, of rest, of joy, of passion, and so on, often very small. To become more and more conscious of the presence of God rather than of his absence. And the more and he's always there, he's always present, even if often we do not connect with that consolation. And it is far more efficient to try to open oneself more for that joy, because the more we open ourselves and we connect with that, I call it joy, but all those positive feelings, the more we learn, because it's a question of exercise, the more we learn to connect with that category of experience, inner experience, the less there will remain space for the negative feelings. That can sound very simplistic, very too simple, but I think that it's far better to work for than to fight against. It's much more efficient to open the path for consolation than to try to pull away, put in the fridge, for instance, the desolation. So the whole idea, or one of the major ideas of the Ignatian spirituality, is exercise, exercise, exercise. And the examen, so the examen of one's experience, searching for consolation, the more you can do it, the more you learn it, the more you can remain connected. I give one example and then I go to the next question. When I was a young priest, in my first mission, the first community where I lived, there was a priest, a Jesuit priest, 50 years old, who was dying from liver cancer. He was 50 years old, big guy, very dynamic, a very good guy, but he was dying. He was dying. He died on Thursday, and on Sunday he was still in the community, and he said, 50 years old, dying, I am a happy man. Even though he knew his life was nearing the end, he was suffering a lot. He was so strong in discernment and in remaining connected with the deeper presence of God in his interiority, that even at that very moment of crisis, he could still say, I am a happy man. I do not know if I could do it, but to have heard that guy say such a thing in those circumstances, for me was really a very strong lesson. Why is it not good to consider negative feelings when taking decisions? I would not say one should not consider at all the negative feelings when taking decisions. Negative feelings, even though there are a lot of nuances to give with regard to what I have been telling up to now, because in 3 times half an hour you really cannot explain Ignatian discernment and spirituality. It is much more to speak about. Negative feelings often, not always, negative feelings rather indicate what we should not do. And it is very good and important to know what one should not do. Meanwhile, the positive feelings, consolation, like Ignatius calls it, rather, because all that too has to be nuanced, rather says something about a growing proximity with God, and therefore ideas, intentions, experiences that go along or that produce, if I can say, or that are accompanied by those positive feelings. For instance, also when you are preparing a choice, a decision, to consider that decision I would take. It gives space, it gives me energy, it gives me trust, and so on. That's rather an indication that indeed God is there. And when you see the way Ignatius took his decisions, and all kind of decisions, also very difficult and very political decisions, it was by listening to his heart, his praying heart, connected really to Jesus, to the living Jesus. It was always searching where, to what possibility, which alternative, where do I feel that consolation, trust, an ongoing one, not for 10 minutes and afterwards there's again desolation. No, an ongoing consolation that says something about what God is asking to me. And desolation often, not always, is the opposite, because some negative feelings are very good. For instance, contrition. Contrition is a negative feeling. Contrition hurts, is painful, is sadness. But contrition means that you recognize for yourself that you have done stupid things and you want to change. You want to convert. You really have the intention to do it better in the future. So contrition is very different from sticking to feelings of guilt, which can really diminish the person, and it doesn't give any perspective. But contrition means that you recognize your guilt and that you want to do it differently in the future. You want to change your life in a positive way. But contrition is not fun. Contrition is not fun. It's a negative feeling, but it's a good feeling coming from the good spirit. Some more explanation about point 2 and 4. What I have. So 4 is not less but more time for silence and prayer. Well, that's number 4 is a very practical one and a very down to earth one. When we are in crisis, when we feel sad, when, for instance, when there is a lot of stress due to Corona and such things, many people tend to stop praying, or more largely stop to do things that help them to their interiority, to find something of rest, because there is the urgency and you cannot lose time and you must be efficient and so on. And that often means practically that they cut their access to the roots and they don't get nourished any longer. And prayer is spiritual nourishment. It's not simply something you should do because God wants you to do it. No, it's time you offer yourself to allow yourself to open yourself to life, to more life. And it's, in that sense, it's eating and drinking. And so when you are weak due to the crisis, when you are more fragile due to a crisis, you need more food and better food, and you need more drink and better drink, rather than skipping it all and stopping, what we often tend to do. Because prayer, because listening to nice music or reading a really good, nourishing book, it doesn't pay off immediately. It doesn't pay off immediately. It's not an easy pleasure. It's not an easy pleasure. And therefore, we tend to skip. So that's very practical and common sense advice Ignatius gives. And then the question about the positive feelings as opposite to the thoughts, that's typical for Pierre Fabre, so who was canonized by Pope Francis because of his expertise in discernment. What is the idea? When you have a really good experience, of which you really feel this is good, this is really good, I feel that joy, that happiness, that openness, that strength, and it continues. It's really good. Okay, says Ignatius, you can trust it. It's very good, be happy with it. And afterwards, do not hesitate to go back to that experience with your memory, to enjoy it again in your memory, and to get strength out of it again, because it is good. And the more you can be nourished by it, the better. But he says, and that's also the language of Ignatius, take care, because the bad spirits can use your trust in that experience by suggesting you bad ideas, even if those ideas may seem good, and making you think, yes, this experience was so good, so the ideas that come along with that experience, they must be as good as the experience itself. So he distinguishes the experience on one hand, and the ideas, the intentions, the words, Pierre Fabre calls them, that come along with that experience. And so he says, take care. Those ideas, those suggestions, those intentions, they can indeed come from the good spirits, but not necessarily. They can as well really come from the bad spirits that tries to misuse, to abuse your enthusiasm when your heart is still warm, and trying to give you so-called good ideas that actually appear not to be good at all. So you must discern, and you must weigh, and you must reflect on those ideas and not assume automatically that they are good. So it's quite subtle. Maybe last question, how to use discernment to help people with lack of self-love, of low self-esteem? Yeah, it's a very good question. I can only repeat what I have already said. The starting point of discernment, but I think the starting point of Christian life, of growth in Christian life, is to allow yourself to experience God's love, to open yourself to that creative power of God's love, not in theory, not as a theological statement, but as an experience. And therefore, the prayer of the examen, la prière d'alliance, het levensgebed, are so important. Train yourself, exercising yourself each day by the examen. Low esteem, lack of self-love is many people suffer from of that. Well, allowing yourself, take the time to discover by examining your experience those little things of goodness, of beauty, of love in one's day, in one's experience, because God is active in the life of any person. And therefore it's so important to allow yourself to realize more that presence by the examen. So to see, but I thought there was nothing today in my day, there was only sadness, but the examen can show, no, but there was this and there was that, and the more you do it, the more refined you will be able to listen, and you will be able to find the small things. And our life is filled with those small experiences, not only of sadness, also of consolation. And therefore Ignatius called his, no, I don't have it here, yeah, his book, The Spiritual Exercises. To exercise oneself, to find God's presence in one's life, to find God in all things. That's the major idea of the Ignatian spirituality. And also people with a lack of self-love can learn that, and the more, I'm not a psychologist, I do not pretend to be a psychologist, but that's what I see when giving spiritual accompaniment to people, the well-being, the incredible gift that examen can be in their life. To see that not everything is sadness, is, how do you say, échec, all that. No, that there is a lot of good, and learning, allowing oneself to see it.
I think this is good to finish with this positive accent. However, I don't think it's finished. It's just the invitation to start the journey, to discover, to rediscover the joy, or to start this adventure of discernment. There are still some questions, I think, but it's not possible to answer all of this.
Christian, may I show something I have forgotten to show? Okay. Just share the screen for 30 seconds. Here, in January, a new book will be published. It's in French, about discernment. I have just finished Les Épreuves. I don't know how you say in English. So it will be published in Brussels, so nearby, and there you will probably find a lot of things about discernment, what we have been talking about. How can I stop it? Screen sharing. Okay.
So now, quite formally, well, formally is not the word. Thank you very much, Nikolaas, for this evening. Thank you for all these 3 workshops. We have a small gift for you. The traditional chapel caps with the spiritual advice. It's not from Ignatius, but I think it could be. Don't tell God you have a big problem. Tell your problem you have a big God. I don't know which one of the rules you presented this can be connected with. And this should be filled with the quite good Belgian pralines. So the next time we see each other, now I'm looking for the possibility to hand it to you.
Welcome in Amsterdam.
Thank you very much, all of you, for your participation. As I said already, also the last time, it's very nice to see your faces and to see you again. Just before we finish, last but not least, if you would like to support the mission and activities of the chapel, please go to our website, Chapel for Europe EU, and there you find the button on the upper right corner of the screen. Thank you for your generosity. And at the end, I would like to wish you already at the beginning of the Advent, and especially in these challenging times, the good journey toward Christmas, to celebrate the one who is the source of our joy. And welcome again to the chapel, virtually or physically, as soon as possible. Have a good night. Bye.